Live from Quito, Ecuador, I'm Suni Gray and this is From the South, the evening news brief from Tell Us Your English, and we start this new edition right now. It has been a dramatic week in Zimbabwe's history. On Sunday, a defiant Robert Mugabe vowed to remain, but then a few days later, he resigned, signaling a significant shift in the country's politics. His heir isn't his wife, Grace, as many had feared. Instead, it's his vice president, Emmerson Mnangagwa. According to some, Mnangagwa was the former president's enforcer. He has now called for all citizens to work together to rebuild the country, and reaffirmed that general elections are due next August. As for former President Mugabe, he has been granted immunity from prosecution. And for more details on that story, we head to Professor Andy Knight, who is the Professor of International Relations at the University of Alberta. Professor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So when you review the recent events in Zimbabwe, are you as hopeful for change as the people apparently are?
Well, I have one concern, and that is that the former Vice President Mnangagwa, he has been very much associated with the repression of the Mugabe regime. So my fear is that if he is sworn in as the new president, we're going to have to be concerned about the way he will treat the people of Zimbabwe and the kind of repression that he exhibited when he was in a position of power. So I'm not as hopeful as many Zimbabweans are about a change in the regime. We see a change, the end of Mugabe, but we don't see a change in the regime necessarily. However, it's hopeful because the election that will be held next year could bring in a new set of leaders into the country, and that's my hope, is that the election would change the situation for Zimbabwe.
And well, we just spoke about the profile of Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa. What are the options looking like for Zimbabwe's elections if they're actually going to have elections in August? We've had a situation where previously someone won and then he wasn't allowed to be president. Isn't it possible that that could be repeated?
I think you're probably referring to Morgan Tsvangirai. I think that's a possibility as well. And my concern here is that the military, which of course have been responsible for the transition from Mugabe to the new regime, the military will still very much be in control. And my fear is that the military, as long as they have that tremendous power, they can actually stop individuals from contesting the election. They can actually help to repress opposition forces who might be interested in running in the next election. However, I'm hopeful that with this new change in Zimbabwe, the population will be onto this, and the population will actually help to ensure that there's a free and fair election in August next year.
In practical terms, what do you think are the most important things for the new government, or even if it's starting from now with Mr. Mnangagwa and leading up to the elections and possibly even further from that? What are some of the most important things for the new administration in Zimbabwe to be thinking of to turn the country around?
Well, as you know, Zimbabwe is an economic mess. So the first thing that has to be done is that the economy has to be stabilized. Secondly, employment rate is very, very high. And therefore, some sort of measures have to be taken, some policies have to be put in place to ensure that, especially the young people, are gaining employment in that country. You know, Zimbabwe is a very rich country. At one point, it was called the breadbasket of Africa. So there needs to be a way of giving back to the people, the farms and the agricultural areas, so that they can actually turn Zimbabwe into the breadbasket of Africa again. And of course, the country is a very rich country, but it's being poorly managed. And I think we need to have, in the new government to come, we need to have a government that will look after the interests of the Zimbabwe people, the economic interests, and the political and social interests of the people.
Thank you so much for that. We've been talking to Professor Andy Knight. He is the Professor of International Relations at the University of Alberta, Canada. On to other news now. We begin with a dramatic turn in the search for the Argentinian submarine that went missing without a trace last week. The Navy now says that an abnormal noise detected near the last known location of the submarine shortly after it disappeared was consistent with an explosion. A huge sea and air hunt is being conducted as the clock runs down for the San Juan submarine, which went missing with 44 crew on board. A Navy spokesperson described the blast in the morning of November 15th as abnormal, short, violent, but non-nuclear.
It is true that we are prudent, but yesterday we had the information from the United States, and today this is very important because it allows us to correlate, confirm a hydroacoustic anomaly that the report from the United States says. And here we are talking about an abnormal, singular, short, violent, non-nuclear event consistent with an explosion.
Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has the latest.
The spokesman of the Argentinian Navy finally confirmed the information that has been circulating over the past few days, in which the San Juan, the Argentinian submarine that disappeared last Wednesday with a crew of 44 officials, could have had a non-nuclear explosion. This was confirmed by the Austrian government after the scientific investigation they were doing, and from also other news we got from other countries. The truth is that now there's a lot of pain and concern for the families that are in the Mar del Plata naval base. This news was a huge hit for them. There hasn't been a concrete reaction from the government of Mauricio Macri about the side effects and the consequences of the situation with the Argentinian Navy, and this lack of information is something that was already known. Also, what the search for the ship implies, which could be at 200 kilometers from the Argentinian coast, from 200 to 325 kilometers from the San Jorge Gulf, from the continental platform, which could also be at 3,000 meters of depth in the Argentinian Sea. So after that expectation that grew over the past few days, the investigation intensifies to try to find the submarine that has been missing for 8 days.
And as Edgardo mentioned, there's mounting criticism in Argentina of the official response to the disappearance. A group of Argentinians gathered outside the Mar del Plata naval base to support the families of the missing crew. Some of the relatives are increasingly angry at the way the search for the submarine has been handled by the Navy and by the government of Mauricio Macri.
We came here to support the boys, all 44 of them. We hope they're okay and that they will be home soon. We feel very emotional. We're sending strength to the families, great strength to the families, and our prayers day by day.
I feel cheated. I don't know if the others...
Has the submarine been found today?
No, it was not found, but they say it is 3,000 meters below the sea, so no. That's why I say they are swines. They knew about it and they are weak. That is my opinion.
The bosses steal the money, that's why this happened. They're villains 1,000 times over. They killed my brother because they sent him out there. I was in the Navy, they're all swine, including President Mauricio Macri.
And news just coming in to tell us here is that some family members are now saying that all the members of the crew are dead. The Argentine Navy are due to make an announcement any minute, and we'll bring you more as we get it. Unprecedented rainfall in Jamaica has left parts of Montego Bay underwater. Prime Minister Andrew Holness traveled to the area to survey the damage. And with more rain forecast for well into the weekend, he says Jamaicans need to brace themselves for the new normal of heavy rainfall and the changes that can force onto their lives.
We are now experiencing weather events that are sudden, intense, and have significant scope in damage. These weather events have a physical impact. Yes, it impacts private property owners, as we have seen on our tour of the city of Montego Bay and environs. It has impacted public property, particular infrastructure. I've toured several drains and gullies that have been totally blocked, not necessarily by debris such as plastic and other forms of solid waste, but blocked by stones, marl cover, and that is very unusual.
More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Cuba, students from the University of Computer Science in Havana have been developing an information management system which can be used in the country's elections this weekend. Our correspondent filed this report.
These are the engineers from the University of Computer Science who have, since the last 3 elections, have taken over the task of developing an information management system for Cuban elections.
We have created an entire ecosystem, starting with a web application that manages all the steps in the electoral process. There's also the Nova operating system, an open-source Cuban operating system. We also have social media, Android-based applications to be used on mobile devices, and various other things.
They tell us this is a safe and reliable system to follow up each step of the Cuban electoral process. This is a University of Computer Science founded 15 years ago by the leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro Ruz, with the purpose of bringing Cuban society to the information era. Since a few years ago, a group of young people have been working on that and putting into action the election project. The students tell us that the information management system for Cuban elections is their gift to the country and to Cuba's technological sovereignty.
Our focuses remain on increasing the security, especially in regards to data management, guaranteeing that all electoral processes are properly registered.
The election project is not unknown to the new ways of participation that are brought forth by social media platforms.
We take part in elections within a digital environment, where we publicize a lot of what is going on. This is just another medium of communication that allows us to reach younger people, teaching them about the voting process in Cuba.
Aldis, Josue, and Marta say they weren't able to resist the call. They say that for them, working on the election project represents a commitment to the university, the Electoral Commission, and above all, Cuba.
We can continue in Cuba, where the government has rejected European Union sanctions that were placed on Venezuela last week, calling them counterproductive and coercive. The new sanctions, put into place on November 13th, include a ban on arms sales and the export of military and surveillance equipment. Cuba's Deputy Foreign Minister, Rogelio Sierra Diaz, criticized the measures, noting that they interfere in the country's internal affairs and are counterproductive to the Bolivarian government's efforts to promote dialogue. The campaign for Venezuela's local elections is getting underway in Caracas and across the country. The candidates for 335 mayoral positions will have 15 days to seek the support of voters in each municipality before the campaign closes on December 7th. There will also be a rerun of the election of the governor of Zulia State on the same day, December 10th. President Nicolas Maduro said the opposition will not succeed in preventing the elections.
The right-wing opposition has a plan of sabotaging the economy to prevent the December 10th municipal elections. I can tell the opposition that come thunder or lightning, there will be elections in Venezuela to choose 335 new mayors. Everyone should vote for a new victory. Voting yes is the only way that we can achieve democracy. Vote no to the economic war.
Violence in Honduras is surging as general elections are just days away. 3 activists from opposition parties have been killed ahead of general elections on November 26. In preparation for the ballot, security forces have been deployed throughout the country. So let's take a look at what's happening in Honduras ahead of Sunday's votes and what the people think about the situation.
At first sight, life goes on in Honduras. In just a few days, general elections will take place in a country where over 60% of the population is poor.
There are no jobs or education. We need free schools because sometimes people with money just look after themselves, while the poor are hungry. And that doesn't make sense because we, the poor, are the ones mostly affected. We suffer all these negative changes. The rich don't suffer because they sleep on a pillow of dollars, unlike us, where we have to struggle to find a way to get 1 peso to feed our families.
They seem to have lost all respect for those who flaunt their wealth and also for those who aspire for political power.
I couldn't say if the one coming to power will be better or worse than the one we have now.
The candidate who's able to win the presidency will face these challenges. Just a few days ago, at least 5 political activists from different parties were killed. Experts assure that justice is not being dealt and violence is used as an electoral strategy.
This isn't new. The thing is that, as elections are moving closer, people talk more about this. But since the coup, social leaders have been killed, political party leaders as well, mostly from the opposition. We could say all of this becomes a day-to-day thing, but it's not really discussed. But when the elections come, it becomes more evident, and what they want to generate here is fear and panic, because almost immediately, security forces take to the streets with their faces covered, saying that they will take care of the situation. But it's been 7 years after the coup, and the situation has not improved. Independent security experts are creating false positives to generate a crisis.
Over 6 million people are registered to vote in a nation where voting is a duty, a right but not an obligation.
Former Uruguayan President Jose Mujica is visiting Panama, where he was awarded an honorary doctorate by the University of Panama. During his speech, the former leader said that democracy is a philosophy against selfishness and that Latin America is the richest continent in terms of resources, but the most unfair. 2 days ago, he was also decorated by Brazil's Federal University of Pampa, where he defended accessibility of higher education to all and said that university students hold a greater responsibility towards society. On Friday, it will have been 1 year since the signing of the peace agreement in Colombia, and the subsequent reports of its actual implementation have not been favorable. Of the 27 laws outlined, only 8 have been approved, and various sectors of the country have denounced the modification of some key aspects of the agreement that undermine the rights of victims, such as the special jurisdiction for peace.
The agreement must be fulfilled was the demand of demonstrators outside of the National Congress in Bogota. Pots and drums became a symbol of their indignation. Citizens are demanding that the national government and Congress implement the peace agreement and preserve the spirit and nature in which it was designed.
The threat of the far right to shred peace is not a threat. It is happening little by little, gradually becoming reality, not only because of the deviations of special justice for peace and the deviations of the laws in Congress, but also through a general aggression against the peace process, which became evident with the killings of former FARC rebels and other popular leaders.
At the same time, in the plenary of the Chamber of Representatives, there is a discussion around the statutory law that would legislate the special jurisdiction for peace. The debate started with 200 propositions to go back on the agreement even more. 90% of them were put forward by the Uribe Support Democratic Center Party.
These renegotiations are happening, and we're not in the agreement. Modifications to the agreement that go beyond the interest of parties or political sectors in the country, and not about favoring the peace agreement and result in leaving this long confrontation in our country.
For the FARC legal advisor, Diego Martinez, it is clear that these modifications to the peace jurisdiction are not only related to the far right's intention of destroying the peace agreement, but also the intentions of the Colombian high class and political elites to not implement justice in the country.
What the Congress is coming up with is a cornered peace jurisdiction, which means a full jurisdiction for the FARC with full conditions and no guarantees, especially for the victims and for what happened in the past to not happen again. Excluding third parties and to exclude state agents who are not militants could mean the guarantee for the conflict to continue, not from the FARC, but from the state.
A position that is shared by the youth who are mobilizing to defend the peace agreement. They consider that if the peace jurisdiction is approved with the modifications that the Congress has made, impunity will have open doors, allowing violence to continue.
In Bolivia, the government approved a significant increase in products made with quinoa by introducing subsidies for various sectors. This measure will greatly help farmers who produce the crop.
Quinoa comes in many ways and can be used in many recipes without losing its characteristics of being one of the world's most complete foods. It's now part of the national subsidy for mothers, children, and senior citizens.
Quinoa is important for us because it is a crop this country produces. It has a high nutritional content. That's why many elite athletes, astronauts, and people who need healthy food consume it.
The subsidized products the government provides to different sectors equals a minimum salary, around $200 a month.
By including quinoa in the subsidized package, we want to promote its consumption among our people.
The amount of quinoa the government obtains from farmers' groups has increased to almost 5 tons annually, and at an adequate price, which is higher than local markets. Over the past years, prices have been affected by the production of transgenic quinoa in many countries.
Quinoa has international recognition, but when it comes to the transgenic quinoa, obviously the price will be lowered. Today's world requires healthy food.
The government's food subsidy purchases 12% of the country's quinoa production, of which almost half is exported. All the product that comes from Bolivia is organic.
Quinoa produced in these lands is well regarded in the market, as opposed to the genetically modified ones, or those that use chemicals and other products.
In this country, 60,000 farmers produce 65 tons of quinoa annually. The production remains stable, although prices in the last 3 years have dropped to almost half, from $4,500 to $2,500 per ton.
We'll be back very soon, so stay with us. Lebanon's Prime Minister Saad Hariri is now pushing for negotiations between all the political parties in the country after he announced he wasn't resigning his post. Our correspondent Hibai Arbide has more from Beirut.
The negotiations have begun in Beirut after Saad Hariri announced he wasn't resigning from his duties as Prime Minister. Let's remember that Lebanon's President Michel Aoun didn't accept Hariri's resignation, and the Prime Minister promised to reconsider or postpone his decision only if there was a negotiation meeting between all the political parties in Lebanon to agree on the creation of a new government. People close to Hariri told the local media that the Prime Minister has demanded an agreement on Hezbollah's disarmament, as well as the organization's departure from Syria and Iraq. This objective could be hard to achieve since Lebanon has a weaker army than Hezbollah, and most importantly, because Hezbollah's leader said during his last public appearance that they are leaving Iraq, but that they will remain in Syria until they achieve military victory. With these demands, Hariri is showing that Saudi Arabia is accepting his decision to remain Prime Minister during these negotiation rounds, which could take months.
Reconciliation meetings between Fatah and Hamas have finished in Cairo with an agreement for elections in 2018. Our Noor Harazin has this report.
The second round of the reconciliation meetings between the two rival Palestinian factions, Fatah and Hamas, has ended in Cairo yesterday. Other Palestinian factions have joined these meetings on the past 3 days in Cairo, like the Islamic Jihad and also the PLFP and the DLFP. Palestinian factions have agreed on so many issues regarding the Palestinian cause. For example, they agreed to do new elections in 2018, and this is going to be the first time in 11 years that the Palestinian people will be able to re-elect again.
And we move from that Noor Harazin report to some more news on Palestine.
Protesters are calling for the reopening of the Rafah crossing, a largely sealed border between Gaza and Egypt. Hundreds of Palestinians, including humanitarian cases, students, holders of residency permits in other countries, and patients seeking treatment outside of Gaza, got a rare chance to leave or return to it in the recent 3-day opening. It was part of the reconciliation agreement between Fatah and Hamas, and protesters want it to be reopened permanently.
You don't know how hard it's our feeling to stand here and not going to our universities. You don't know how hard, really you don't know. We are here to say a message to everyone in the world who have the right to open Rafah crossing point. We are here to say to everyone in the world that we have the right to learn as we have the right to travel.
Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has called the Palestinian conflict the primary issue of the Muslim world. This during a speech in Tehran calling for unity across the region.
Today, the issue of Palestine is the primary issue within the Muslim world, since it is an Islamic country that has been usurped and turned into a means of sabotaging the security of several countries in the region. This cancerous tumor should be fought against.
The Spanish government has jailed more than 500 migrants in a Malaga prison as the waves of refugees arriving by boat on the country's coast have increased. Our correspondent Sergio Rodrigo sent this report.
We're standing just outside the Archidona prison, a place where the Spanish government has jailed more than 500 migrants. They have been detained in a center that hasn't yet been inaugurated in violation of a Spanish law and its constitutional court. Their family members have arrived mainly from France to denounce the systematic violations of human rights from the government. They have said that they haven't been allowed to visit their loved ones since they were detained in open sea by the migration Spanish authorities, and also denounced that even children are being held in this prison. Social movement have insisted that the government should remedy the situation, although the Interior Ministry has been clear that the group of migrants will remain in the Archidona prison for 40 more days. Family members are pushing for the liberation without the help of any legal assistance. They have said that they will remain outside the prison building to protest against its violation of human rights.
And with the end of this report from Sergio, we've come to the end of our evening news brief. So for these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, tellusyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I am Sereni Gray. Thank you so much for watching.